We're very excited to have with us today Virginia Senator-elect Tim Kaine, who was victorious in that state battle with George Allen. He is the new Senator-elect from Virginia. We're excited to have him on. Welcome back to the John Fredericks Show, Senator-elect Tim Kaine.
Hey, John. Good to be on with you. Thanks so much.
All right, I got to give two shout-outs. First shout-out to give to my wife, Ann. Ann was the only one in the state that predicted that Tim Kaine would run ahead of Obama in Virginia by 50,000 votes. I think she was off by about 10.
Yeah, that's very close to what it ended up being.
So just about 50,000. She was the only one who predicted that, based on the fact that you had canvassers canvassing us with a Romney sticker on the door, trying to get us to vote, split the ticket with Tim Kaine. So she was the only one who predicted that, and certainly her models were better than the Romney campaign models coming out of Boston that were all wrong. It's incredible. In fact, we were saying the other day, and I don't want to get you involved in this, but I got to get off my chest. If the Romney modeling campaign was doing an IPO right now, the FBI would be investigating them. They were that wrong.
Well, I'll tell you about your wife. I would tell people during the course of the campaign, John, that there will be thousands of Romney-Kaine voters, but whether it's 2,000 or 50,000, I don't know.
The other shout-out I have to give is to your wife, Ann. She was phenomenal on the campaign trail, and I think she definitely contributed to your margin of victory. Your wife, Ann.
Thank you. Now you don't know whether your wife is listening, and I definitely should have had my wife turn it on to her say that, but I'm going to tell her she did probably about 150 events for me, and as I maybe have explained before, Ann was never able to campaign for me before because of her juvenile court judge position, but it was fantastic to have her. She just did a superb job.
Hey, you married up.
I do. Oh, man, did I?
George Allen did also. I said that the other day.
Yep.
Susan Allen was also fabulous. She was on our show many times, and just a fine lady. And now we have to govern. Now the other thing I have to do is I gave an impassioned plea on the air yesterday for Senator Warner to remain in the Senate to help lead the nation, and I'm going to take full credit for the fact that he took my advice, and he's now staying in the Senate. One of the original members of the Gang of Six worked hard with my good friend Saxby Chambliss in the Senate. Now, Senator-elect Kaine, you've got a lot of work to do. A tenet of your pillar of your campaign was that you would reach across the aisle to get things done. How do you see this playing out now?
Well, you've got to start it right away. We have new Senate orientation next week where I think there's a dozen senators and Democrats and Republicans who are newcomers, and I'm going to start, I've already actually called all the newcomers and told them I'm really looking forward to being part of a great group of freshmen, and we'll go up there next week and start that process. We're obviously not directly involved in the work that Congress has to do during the lame duck session. I think that if Congress can find a deal to avoid the catastrophic sequestration cuts, that can then serve as the beginnings of a really good dialogue on a bigger picture budget deal. I'd love to be in the mix in that discussion, and I hope that they'll consider the compromise proposal I've put on the table, even for the short term for the sequester, because I think that offers a path of compromise that involves, making some significant decisions to save some money, find some targeted savings, but also do some work on the revenue side, because I think you have to fix both sides of the budget.
Senator-elect Kaine, give us some specifics again on exactly what your compromise plan is that you've forwarded.
Sure. Yeah, let me talk sequester, the short-term piece, and then long-term. So on the short-term side, what I've said is we have $1 trillion worth of automatic cuts that are going to go into effect at the end of the year over a 10-year period if no deal is struck. So do three things. Agree that the Bush tax cuts will expire for the first dollar of income over $500,000. That's a compromise between the Democratic position of a tax cut should expire over $250,000 and the Republican position of they should all be permanent. Second, fix Medicare and allow for the negotiation for prescription drug prices instead of just accepting the prices charged by pharmaceutical companies. And third, take away the tax subsidies we currently give to the big five oil companies who are incredibly profitable. They don't need help. If you do those three things, John, you don't have $1 trillion now of sequester cuts to find. You have $235 billion of targeted savings over 10 years, which Secretary Panetta and others say that's a very manageable amount. They say we can save money, just don't make the number too ugly and don't make us save on the wrong things rather than on the right things. So, and each of the three positions that I've advocated, they're all compromises between Democratic and Republican positions. So it's not a finger-pointing exercise. We can cut a deal. If you do a deal like that, then what you end up doing is avoiding the economically devastating aspect of the sequester cuts, but you also create some confidence that deals can be struck, and then you move forward into a 2013 where you can have a bigger picture discussion about budgetary sanity. And I continue to believe, with a lot of others, that you probably need to make $2 or $3 of cuts in spending for every dollar in revenue, but you do have to have revenue. You're not going to solve this if you say no revenues never, or if you say only $1 of revenue for every $10 of cuts. I think the right ratio is $2 or $3 of cuts for every dollar of revenue.
Have you forwarded this plan to Senator Reid? How has he reacted to that?
I actually know. I haven't forwarded to it like, here's my plan, Senator Reid, but it's been pretty extensively covered in the course of my campaign, because this position was something I put on the table a year ago, and in the Washington network, especially the Post and others, have covered it very extensively. And I do know that at least my compromise position on the Bush tax cuts has been talked about pretty significantly in the Senate. So everybody's aware of it. I'm not aware of others out there who have been proposing it. I put it on the table a year ago, but I do know that it is at least being discussed, and I hope that it can be, again, a template for an immediate deal. But then if we can strike an immediate deal, I think that will send a really positive signal about our willingness to compromise on a long-term budget resolution.
Senator Warner, how is he? Is he going to be the one perhaps that takes this up the ladder, takes it to Speaker Boehner? How will it work internally?
I hope so.
Technically now you're Senator-elect, so.
Yeah, I'm still on the outside looking in. I do know Mark and I've talked about this at some length. I think he feels like it's a very reasonable proposition, and Mark is playing a critical role in this Gang of Six process, trying to get senators to work together. And his work is not just about the budget; it's also about the bigger issue of just, restarting the tradition of senators working across the aisle. And so this is a position that I think he would feel very comfortable with it. And I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he's going to definitely be very central to the discussions over the next 6 weeks and beyond. I definitely want to join in any group of senators that is working to reach across the aisle and find a resolution of this problem and all of our problems. Because, it's interesting, what was the public mandate out of Tuesday's election? Some would say it was divided government or status quo government. I think just like in 2010, they sent a signal that they want cooperative government. They don't want all the levers of power in the hands of one party. And they want us to work together to find solutions. So I think there's a mandate for cooperation and common ground, and I'm just anxious to get there and add one more to the number who are promoting it.
Well, I believe that you hit the nail on the head, Senator-elect, because I think that was the mandate for common sense, compromise, and working together. And, that's also been the genesis of the U.S. Senate. That's been the history of the U.S. Senate, that the House is more, there's 435 members. It's more like a mob, where the Senate is very collegial, work together and things like that.
Yeah, if you just think of the framers sort of designed it that way, 435 people for 2-year terms don't get to know each other that well, but 100 people who serve 6-year terms, a lot more of it is supposed to be based on relationship and listening and consensus building. And if anything, you could argue, not to excuse hyper-partisanship in the House, but if anything, you could argue that the Senate has strayed farther from its kind of original intent than the House has. Well, we got to get it back to doing what it was supposed to do.
Senator-elect Kaine, no question about it. I'm gonna go back to Zell Miller when I covered him when he was a Democrat senator from Georgia. Mm-hmm. I remember going to his office and him complaining to me that the more partisan Democrats were putting an unbelievable amount of pressure on him to toe the line on their caucus, whatever the issues were back then. And I remember him saying to me, hey, go tell your newspaper that if they keep bothering me, I'm just going to change and caucus with the GOP and the heck with them.
Yeah.
So that's I think that's where the whole thing started, and hopefully we can expand the Gang of Six to the Gang of Seven, and people can understand. You know, when I covered Saxby Chambliss in Georgia, I mean, he got absolutely skewered by conservatives for trying to participate on the Gang of Six and try to solve these problems, and it's infuriated me because that's his job. That's what he's paid to do.
Yeah, it is. And you know, the one thing
crazy.
I'll say is, yes, I want to join, but the best thing is if it always grows by two. You know, I think it's really important to keep it balanced. And so one of the things I'm excited about next week is starting to meet these other freshmen who are coming in with me and finding, you know, there are two new freshman incomers, Jeff Flake of Arizona and Ted Cruz from Texas, actually a third, Deb Fisher. So there's three, Deb Fisher from Nebraska, and I'm looking forward to meeting all of them and, you know, building up the kinds of relationships and hopefully bringing more people into the Common Ground Caucus.
Right, and then there's also Tammy Baldwin.
Yeah, we have Tammy Baldwin
from Wisconsin.
On the Democratic side, you got Tammy Baldwin, Mazie Hirono, Elizabeth Warren, Chris Murphy, me, and then you have Angus King, who is an independent, but you know, based on his kind of track record of like who he supported for president and stuff, most people feel like he'll caucus with the Democratic Party. I don't know whether he will or not.
Right, but there's some definite there's some definite moderates in there, and you know, you combine that with Senator Landrieu in Louisiana, Senator Joe Manchin, who I've become a tremendous fan of,
Joe's a good
West
friend
Virginia,
because
he's a straight talker, and you know, the bottom line is we have to get these issues solved, and I look forward to your being up there. Now, one question I do have, and I know that during the campaign you were saying that you would try to take a common sense approach. I know you haven't done your staff assignments yet, but can we expect to see a conservative or two on your Senate staff in some capacity?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you probably will. I had conservatives. I had former Republican legislators serving in my cabinet. Two former Republican legislators and at least one other member of my cabinet was a Republican, and I felt like you know, my opponent got 47% of the vote, but I do have to worry about that 47%. I do have to represent that 47%. And so I'm going to, you know, put a staff together that I hope any Virginian will be able to look at that staff and say, there's people who are advocating at the table for points of view that I think are important.
Senator-elect Tim Kaine, we're out of time. We thank you for joining us today on the John Fredericks Show. We look forward to your working with Republicans and Democrats to solve some of the issues that we have. And I think that the compromise plan that you have has got tremendous traction. I hope it works out.
Well, John, thanks so much, and I look forward to talking with you guys on a regular basis during the next years. And
all right, sir. Again, thanks for being with us, and as always, we appreciate your unabashed candor.
All right, thanks so much.